the Republicans are not the only group that have been divided and beset by fears over Mamdani's rise. There has certainly been a lot of talk among Jewish New Yorkers about how his pro-Gaza stances and how his past activism could affect them in the city. So, how will Mamdani's policies affect Jewish New Yorkers? Is this good or bad news for them? Here to tell us about that is Simone Zimmerman.
Many New Yorkers are celebrating Zohran Mamdani's win, but there is nervousness among some communities, one in particular, and not without cause. Last week, a group calling itself the Jewish Majority published a Rabbinic Call to action aimed at Zohran Mamdani in the last weeks of his campaign. It said, "We will not accept a culture that treats Jewish self-determination as a negotiable ideal or Jewish inclusion as something to be granted." It said, "The safety and dignity of Jews in every city depend on rejecting that false choice." In other words, the safety and dignity of Jews depends on Mamdani's defeat. Mamdani was not defeated, and so is the safety of Jewish New Yorkers in jeopardy. I am joined now by Jewish American activist Simone Zimmerman, who was canvassing for Mamdani before the election. Simone, we'll come back to that letter, but first, what can you tell us about how Jewish New Yorkers feel about their new mayor?
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. And the first thing I want to say is that the Jewish community is diverse just as every other community in the city, ideologically, politically, religiously. The Jewish communities in New York that I am part of, we're celebrating in the thousands across the city. We've been canvassing and organizing for the last year to elect Zohran Mamdani because he is a part of our movement, and we see the vision that he put forward of an affordable, inclusive city as a vision for a city that we want to live in and that will be good for us as Jewish people.
Some 2/3 of Jewish voters backed Mamdani's main rival, Andrew Cuomo, but 1/3 voted for Mamdani. How did he win them over? I mean, as you say, this is a group with immense political diversity, just like any other. But perhaps the question then is, what were the key issues on which he managed to win all of his voters over?
Look, Jewish New Yorkers want the same thing that all New Yorkers want. We want to live in a city that is affordable. We want to live in a city that welcomes and celebrates the diversity and difference across the city. The coalition that I'm a part of, the Jews for Zohran coalition, which included organizations like Jews for Racial and Economic Justice and Jewish Voice for Peace, we are acting in a very long lineage of Jewish socialism and progressivism in New York City. Many of our ancestors were immigrants who came to the city, who have helped make it the city that it is today. Jewish culture and Jewish politics are so much of a fabric of the city. And I think the voices that you're referring to are very much a part of one very loud, very well-resourced group of our community that claims to speak on our behalf. But it's important for me to say that it's not just that he won over many of us, it's that many of us have already been in coalition with him and the other organizations that helped get him elected for decades in this city. This is a movement win that is many decades in the making.
But when you're constantly told that this person is going to be dangerous for someone from your background, and it wasn't just coming from outspoken, Jewish leaders, it was coming from a lot of politicians who were just trying to undermine Mamdani, were saying, he's going to be dangerous for Jews. Is that worrying for people? I mean, was that something that Jewish voters had to really take into consideration when casting their ballots?
I mean, of course it is, but it's important for me to say that there has been millions of dollars in misinformation invested in scaring Jewish New Yorkers and misinforming them about who Zohran Mamdani is and what he stands for. I have a friend who came to visit a few weeks ago, and she told me she was talking to her relatives on the Upper East Side, and she became an expert in Zohran's policies overnight because she just had to fact check all the things that they were saying to her, and none of them were true about him. I mean, there has just been an absolute barrage of misinformation that has been trying to smear and misrepresent what Zohran stands for.
Do you think people see that? I mean, as you just described your friend, who was fact-checking everything, has there been a learning here that a lot of that messaging or a lot of that weaponization of anti-Semitism doesn't hold up when you compare it with the facts? This sort of disalignment between Mamdani's real campaign and the campaign as it was represented to certain Jewish communities. Do you feel like maybe there's a wake-up call for some people that could come from that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, first of all, I think we should say they took it way too far. Andrew Cuomo ran a racist, Islamophobic zombie campaign. I mean, it felt like he was barely even here in the city, barely trying to win people over, and just doing work. The thing that he ran on was people's deepest fears and resentments, and he tried to stoke racism and division. And I think a lot of Jews saw through that and were frankly really insulted by it. I was personally very insulted by it. But I think even more than that, when you're talking about what this question of safety, I mean, I just want to like take a step back for a second and look outside of New York City. I mean, this is a week in which, in the last couple of weeks, we are seeing some of the scariest forces of anti-Semitism in the MAGA movement entering into the mainstream and gaining wider platform and visibility, not to mention the ongoing terror that the Trump administration is sowing across the country right now. And I think the idea, so many American Jews, well, first of all, we should say a huge majority of our community did not vote for this administration, right? Sees the anti-Semitism in the MAGA movement as the biggest threat to our safety in this country. And we were insulted by the idea that there was this corrupt Democratic politician who, by all looks, was the favorite to win of the Trump administration. And we don't want to be a part of being used in that way. And the way that they tried to play against our fears and to distract from the fact that there is real rising anti-Semitism in this country, and it is emanating directly from the administration right now.
Now, as is the case with you, Simone, Palestinian rights is a key part of Mamdani's political identity. He's made it clear that for him, this runs really deep.
Grow up as someone, especially in the third world, you have a very different understanding of the Palestinian struggle. It is one that is framed in terms of empathy and solidarity. Specifically growing up in South Africa post-apartheid, you know, it felt as if one of the most natural things to wear around my body was a keffiyeh.
Let's look again at that letter from the Jewish majority, or the self-titled Jewish majority. It was signed by over 1,000 rabbis, and it said that Mamdani's win is a safety risk for Jews because he challenges the idea of Jewish self-determination. What did you make when you saw this, Simone?
Well, I want to say two things about that. The first is, once again, I think it's abundantly clear that part of the grassroots power behind this movement to elect Zohran was very much because people saw him standing up, fighting for Palestinian freedom. And what that showed people is that, one, he's consistent on his principles, and two, that he's not going to back down in the face of fear and intimidation. And I mean, all the forces in this country that we know are the millions of dollars and political power that is invested in making politicians afraid to take a principled stance on Palestinian freedom in a moment in which there has been a US-backed genocide in Gaza. And so, I mean, Zohran, his fight for Palestinian freedom has been consistent with the fight that we've seen his entire time in political life. And that's the first thing. And I think many Jews who are horrified by what has happened in Gaza are the very people who have been in that movement fighting alongside of him. So, you know, we're seeing a sea change in American Jewish opinion on this issue. It's important for me to say that Jews were in the movement to elect him because of those positions, not despite them. Now, specifically to the rabbi letter, I mean, I think this idea that they use the word inclusion. I'm glad that you brought that up, because for me, as a Jewish New Yorker, I see the growing presence of a Muslim progressive in office, the way that he brought in so many communities that have been overlooked and ignored for too long. I mean, his campaign really brought this palpable sense of joy and togetherness and celebration of the difference that exists across the city. That is what makes New York City such a vibrant, joyful, powerful city to live in. And for me, the growing representation of those communities that have been overlooked for so long is not a threat to my safety and belonging in the city. It's something that I want to be part of, that I celebrate. And I think it's really a shame that there is a certain group of people. And by the way, that letter was signed by many rabbis who do not actually live in New York City. So it's important for me to say that so many of those people are representing this kind of an older generation, an outdated generation that is desperate to enforce a conformity, an ideological conformity in our community that simply does not exist. And in New York City, we've seen thousands and thousands of Jews turn up, buy into this vision of an affordable, inclusive city, and want to celebrate alongside our Muslim and South Asian neighbors who have been left out of politics for too long. And that vision of inclusivity is something that we're part of and we're helping build.
Was this election a referendum on Zionism in New York, or is that a manipulation?
I mean, of course. I mean, the largest Jewish city in the world just elected a Muslim anti-Zionist mayor. This is a historic moment. And, once again, as I said, the campaign was a campaign about affordability, about inclusivity in the city. The media and certain political forces tried their hardest to make it a referendum on Zionism. They asked Zohran question after question after question. He stood firm in his commitment to equality and dignity for Palestinians and for all people. And he, despite the best attempts of this political establishment to smear him and to scare people away from him and to make the conversation about Israel, it's clear that it didn't work.
And another thing that it maybe could be seen as a referendum on, which you've touched on, was racism in politics. I mean, again, the war against racism in politics, that is one that you fight, Simone, and the Islamophobia in the campaign against Mandani was really, really prevalent, as was discussion about anti-Semitism and accusations of anti-Semitism. Do you see this moment as a victory in the fight against racist politics? Or is this a dark moment in which these views have become so normalized?
I mean, look, we're going to see what happens. I think that, it's been so meaningful to watch the way that Zohran spoke so clearly against Islamophobia. So many people, as he said, so many communities in the city expect indignity, and the Cuomo campaign just really played on the scariest kinds and most disgusting kinds of racism to smear Zohran and misrepresent him and scare people away from voting from him. And I think the rebuke to those racist policies is powerful and is palpable. And I hope that we're going to see many more people see in this vision of togetherness and solidarity that the campaign has put forward and are going to want to join it and be a part of it. And I think, to me, almost the most important thing that he said on election night was turn up the volume, right? I mean, this is turn up the volume, President Trump. This is a campaign that is at its core about standing up to this fascist authoritarian movement in this country that is trying to sow terror and division across our communities. And New York City just elected somebody who's going to fight back against that. And I'm so proud to be part of this movement of thousands of Jews who want to stand alongside him to fight back and to make New York City a beacon against racism, against white nationalism, and a beacon of togetherness and belonging.
Thank you, Simone.
Mamdani's mayoral campaign has energized voters at a time when the Democratic Party brand feels lost. So could he offer a way forward? Here now to speak to me about Mamdani and the future of the Democratic Party is American political commentator Katie Halper. Now, Mamdani's left-wing economic policies and activist background have divided the Democratic Party, many of whom have failed to offer him strong support when asked.
Do you endorse his candidacy?
I support the Democrat in the race, sure. But let me just say this. He's not the only star.
Do you see Mamdani as the future of the Democratic Party?
No, I think the future of the Democratic Party is going to fall, as far as we're concerned, relative to the House Democratic Caucus.
Did you vote for Mandani or Cuomo?
Look, I voted, and I look forward to working with the next mayor to help New York City.
Mamdani, are you going to support him?
I have learned a long time ago, let New York politics be New York politics. We got enough challenges in Jersey.
So what's holding you back from endorsing him right now?
Well, we don't really know each other.
So, Katie, we've had on the screen there a pretty embarrassing assortment of responses from the Democratic leadership when asked about support for Mamdani. Why are they so reluctant to endorse their party's mayoral candidate in New York's elections?
Well, it's not that they're reluctant to, it's that they are loath to. I mean, Zohran Mamdani represents everything that these milquetoast centrist Democrats do not represent. And they don't like his policies, they don't like his message, but they just don't like his program either. Whether it's making the city affordable or saying that, Palestinians are human beings and there's a genocide in Gaza, these are things that Democrats refuse to say. And, it's immoral for Democrats to refuse to say these things, but it's also electorally stupid, I would say. And that's why there's such little enthusiasm for the Democrats.
And yet, as we've seen, Mamdani came to a stunning victory. We've seen him really energizing turnout among voters in New York, including the young, including the less politically engaged. What do you think the lesson is that the Democrats are taking from his victory? If they so dislike his style of politics, surely they do see something to be learned from this at a time where, according to the latest poll, 28% of voters only say they have positive views of the party.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you should never underestimate the Democratic Party's ability to not receive the important takeaways or not act on actionable intelligence. They have a kind of pathological, I think, fear of taking on corruption or the system in any real meaningful way. And that's because in many ways, in many areas, they're beholden to the same donors that Republicans are beholden to. I think a lot of people make the mistake, they assume that Democrats are kind of inept or just cowards, and they are to some extent that, but they also choose to not fight the fight. They choose to, it's very performative, right? They don't actually want to change certain things. I mean, they care about social issues, which are important, not enough to, codify it. Like, Obama and Biden didn't codify Roe v. Wade when they were president. But especially when it comes to economic issues, when it comes to corporate power, and when it comes to foreign policy, there really is very little difference. Now, of course, Zohran Mamdani, as mayor, won't have a strong public policy reach, but I think that what is so threatening about him is that he shows the real way to respond to Trump, and he shows a moral framework, and he shows a total unapologetic position on this. And he, in fact, said during his speech, one of the most moving lines was saying that he apologizes for none of it. Apologizes not for being Muslim, not for being a democratic socialist. That's something else that the Democrats fear. And it is embarrassing and it's humiliating. And, there was an article in the New York Times, and it actually said that one of the reasons that Chuck Schumer was, as you said, reluctant to endorse is that he sees himself as the guardian of Israel. And so if you see yourself as the guardian of Israel, then you're not going to want to endorse someone who is not afraid of taking on Israel and its genocidal policy towards Gaza.
Clearly, there's a lot of different policy priorities in the Democratic Party, as you mentioned, very divided on Israel-Gaza, where the Democratic leadership seems to be out of touch with its base, very divided, again, on corporate money and economic inequality. Do you see Mamdani's win as the Democrats look ahead to the 2026 midterms? Do you see Mamdani's win as a vindication of the Bernie Sanders AOC wing of the party? Do you think that it's increased their power and their leverage looking ahead to midterms in terms of the direction and the tone that the party takes? Or do you remain of the opinion that, the reluctance is too strong?
I mean, I think we'll have to see, but I do think it's encouraging. I think it's not just encouraging in what it tells us that Democrats should do and could do, but it's also encouraging in that it shows what doesn't work from the opposition. I mean, Cuomo ran a very Islamophobic, very dog-whistling campaign. He laughed at a Fox News interviewer during a radio interview when the Fox News interviewer said that, Zohran Mamdani would be cheering for another 9/11. And this politics of bigotry, don't work when you're offering, and this is a really important takeaway, when you're offering material benefits. I think that when there's a vacuum, when people aren't offering things, that's when you get the demagoguery that can really take hold. I think that a large reason that Trump won both times is because people felt like the system wasn't working for them. So the more that people's needs are met, the harder it is to appeal to the harder it is to demagogue and use racism and bigotry effectively.
Yeah, that was definitely not a winning tactic. What you did mention, interestingly, though, was that part of Mamdani's appeal was this more confrontational stance towards Trump, was the willing to push back against the Trump administration. There also seems to be appetite from the Republican side for confronting Mamdani. There's a lot of anger towards Mamdani. We've seen Trump send National Guard troops into blue states whose leaders he has disagreements with. We've seen threats to deport Mamdani for more intense ICE raids. Do you see a brewing confrontation between Mamdani's New York and the Trump administration, given already the government's overreach in several blue states, and given this kind of appetite among the base for someone to stand up or push back against what they see as an incredibly overreached government?
Yeah, I mean, Zoran's going to have to be very smart and strategic about this, and I'm sure he has a lot of plans on how to deal with this. But, opposition from Trump can also help politicians. We saw this with LA Mayor Karen Bass, whose numbers went up after Trump went after her and after she kind of fought back. So we shouldn't also dismiss the power of having Trump go after you. And, I think that Zoran has a kind of AOC-like ability to joust that we don't see from many Democrats. They're very good at social media. They're very good at messaging. They're very charismatic and charming. And I think that, Trump does not do well against people like that, people who aren't afraid to really fight back.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point that
he may find embarrassing. He may actually overreach and fail and then stop.
Yeah, I think like Cuomo's attacks, it could have the reverse effect and the exact opposite of what he would want by going after Mamdani. You've given us a lot of interesting comments to think about. Katie, thank you so much for speaking to Middle East Eye today.
One last thing I would just like to say is that when you have people like Jonathan Greenblatt at the ADL who's putting together a Mamdani monitor, these people fearmonger about anti-Semitism. I know you spoke to Simone Zimmerman about the issue of the Jewish vote, but I really have to say, I can't emphasize enough how much people like Jonathan Greenblatt and the ADL and AIPAC are creating anti-Semitism. It's not Zohran Mamdani. I mean, I just interviewed someone who actually ran for office, and Zohran Mamdani was his campaign manager. And this person, Ross Barkan, is a journalist. He's Jewish. He says that Mamdani doesn't have an anti-Semitic bone in his body, and I'm sure of that. But it's really interesting that the people who are actually trivializing real anti-Semitism and fomenting anti-Semitism by claiming that all Jews stand in solidarity and are represented by a state that's literally live streaming a genocide, those are the people we have to worry about. Those are the people, if you care about Jewish safety, we have to worry about. Those are the people that I, as a Jew, am afraid of. Not afraid of as in I give them any respect, but what they do is scary. What Zohran Mamdani does is not scary. What Zohran Mamdani does is good for all New Yorkers, including Jewish New Yorkers like myself.
Yeah, you're not the only Jewish voice that's been frustrated by that dissonance, as you mentioned. Katie, thank you so much for your strong words today, and thank you so much for making the time to speak to MEE Live.